Dr. Kanchan Koya, thank you so much for being with us here on ITV Gold. How are you doing today?
I am pretty good. I have to say the weather, having turned in New York, more sunshine, more blue skies, definitely has helped the mood and the general disposition despite all the challenges. So I'm doing pretty well.
Yes, it's so nice to have you here on ITV Gold because today we're discussing your book and a lot on wellness and healthy living and a healthy lifestyle. But, with everything that's happening here in the social climate, it's so important to have a positive perspective on life and to discuss things that are good for us. So I, again, thank you for being here with us. I kind of want to start off the interview discussing your book, Spice Spice Baby, a great title, by the way. But what's even greater is I see here you're a molecular biologist and, you wrote this book. You're also a blogger. You're an influencer as well. You're working with BuzzFeed for Tasty as well. Where is this passion for food and its benefits coming from? And tell me a little bit about how you bring forth your passion with all of the knowledge you've learned. And, what's the secret behind this?
Yeah, so I think I was born a foodie. Many fellow Indians might appreciate, I think Indian cuisine is just so packed with flavor that I think once we try it, there's no going back. We just become food obsessed. And so growing up, I love to eat. And I think I was also really interested in health and science and biology. So those two were sort of the dominant interests for me. And then once I finished my PhD and I dabbled a little bit in pharmaceutical drug development, I realized that my real passion lay at the intersection of food and health. Yeah. And so after I became a mom, I started a blog really as a hobby, just to see, what would happen. I was kind of taking it a little bit slow work-wise when I became a mom. And the blog just grew and there was a lot of interest. It was called Spice Spice Baby. I grew up with spices, as most of us do, and my scientific training was showing me that a lot of these spices are being studied now from a modern scientific perspective for their health benefits. And I was like, wow, all these like granny tales about the health benefits of this spice or that spice seem to be really being validated in the modern scientific setting. So that was pretty cool. So I think it was really a combination of my love for food, my love for eating, and my love for health that kind of came together as Spice Spice Baby, the platform, right, which started out about educating people, around the health benefits of spices. And now it's really about food as medicine, lifestyle as medicine, always with a little bit of spice.
So let's talk about the book a little bit more here, Dr. Koya, because I feel like it's so important to discuss what you're talking about here. We're talking about ancient spices. There's a lot of Indian heritage and culture involved in it. And I love that your recipes also sort of reflect that. But you're talking about 15 key spices and its benefits. Could you reflect on, what some of these spices are? And also, why are these the key spices for everyone's health and well-being?
Yeah, so the book Spice Spice Baby decided to do a scientific deep dive into 15 spices. And I picked those 15 spices not because I think the other spices are not important, but because I wanted to give people a starting point. And I really wanted to talk very, very directly to people who didn't grow up with spices. So, of course, Indians have grown up with spices. They may not fully understand, though, what the benefits of those spices are. They may have heard, things here and there around Ayurvedic benefits. And that's amazing. It's a great starting point. But I wanted to go deep from a scientific perspective. And so the 15 spices that I chose, I believe, are spices that are very, very adaptable to cooking in the modern kitchen. Whether you're Indian, whether you're an Indian American, whether you're from any part of the world. So I tried to lay out the benefits of the spices as the beginning of the book, and then really give people 100 different recipes where they can use these spices. Some of the recipes are Indian. There's always an Indian influence in a lot of my cooking.
Right.
Some of them are just ways in which you can spice up your kind of everyday basics, like oatmeal, pancakes, cookies, banana bread, popcorn, like your smoothies, because not everybody's eating Indian food 3 times a day, right? Even Indians may not be. Like, we all like variety. So I tried to create kind of a global canvas of recipes using these 15 spices that I think are very, very easy to use in the modern kitchen.
Is it to normalize perhaps Indian food and also like these Indian spices? Are you trying to create a target market, which is basically everybody, not just South Asians?
Yeah, definitely. I think I wanted to demystify spices is what the way I really thought about it. I think they have this mystical kind of aura. People tend to associate them with ethnic food, and
Right,
people find them a little bit scary if they're not used to cooking in an ethnic way kind of all the time. So I wanted to demystify them so that globally people can embrace them on a day-to-day basis.
right.
And yes, I wanted to make Indian food a little bit more approachable, healthier, because sometimes there's that connotation of like the heavy, butter chicken or
Yeah.
saag paneer or whatever the common dishes that people think of as Indian food, right? I wanted to make it seem brighter, lighter, fresher, and more in line with a healthy lifestyle.
You often talk about the fact that the reason you started Spice Spice Baby was, again, there were a lot of misconceptions around spices, and you grew up around them because you are Indian, and so you were really exposed to it, and you saw the health benefits. What are some of these common myths or misconceptions about spices, which sort of, hinder people from trying it?
Oh yeah, the most common misconception is that spices are spicy. So you'll hear non-Indians usually say, "Oh, I like spices, but I'm scared of them because I don't like spicy food." And
Right.
so that was my first myth that I had to bust, which is really outside of the chili pepper family and the black pepper family. Most spices are aromatic, fragrant, wonderfully nuanced, and not really spicy. Think of cardamom, cinnamon, clove, cumin, coriander, paprika, on and on and on, right? They're not really spicy, they're just flavorful. So that was the first myth. Yeah, so the second most common misconception that I encounter is that people think that to enjoy spices on a regular basis and their health benefits and flavor benefits, they have to cook Indian food or they have to cook a curry or some kind of ethnic dish. And I wanted to make the spices more approachable no matter your culinary preference.
Right.
So that's the second one. And then the third one was that you can't give children spices. So when I started Spice Spice Baby, it was all about, trying to educate parents to raise more adventurous eaters. And people would say, "Oh, but I can't give my baby spices. Like that's so weird." And I'm like, "Why not? Your kid can have cinnamon and sweet potato and cardamom and pear." So yeah, just kind of making spices more mainstream and allowing people to embrace them on a regular basis in their kitchen for better health is really what I'm passionate about.
So then my next question has to be, Dr. Koya, what are these health benefits? I know like we cannot go into a lot of
Yeah.
the spices right now, but in general, when we're looking at adding these spices or, we're in a quarantine life right now, I think it's a great time to work on your wellness and eating clean and better. What are some of these health benefits we can focus on and perhaps some of the spices that go with it?
Yeah, so there are a lot of health benefits that have been studied. And like you said, it would be impossible to cover all of them in this interview. But I like to take, if I was going to take sort of a bird's eye view of the spice world and really the research that's gone into studying spices,
Right.
I would say some of the best studied and understood benefits are around management of inflammation. And I think that's actually an important topic because as we look at, the coronavirus pandemic and COVID-19 and how it manifests in some people as a very, very severe disease with
Right.
severe complications, we're learning that the severe complications have to do with the body's inflammatory response that has kind of run amok. Like it's an out of balance inflammatory response. And when you look at spices, many spices emerge as very powerful anti-inflammatory agents. So you do want some inflammation because
Right.
inflammation is your body's defense. But when that inflammation doesn't calm down or it just keeps going, that's when you get damage to the lungs, to other parts of the body. So when you can incorporate foods like, for example, the top spices that come out in studies as anti-inflammatory powerhouses would be, no surprise, turmeric is a big one, the cayenne chili pepper, paprika family, black pepper, sumac, which I think Indians are less familiar with. It's a Middle Eastern spice that is kind of lemony and tangy, but it's really wonderful on hummus and salads. Also very powerful at fighting inflammation. Cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, on and on. So cumin, coriander, all of these spices are really going to help you manage and keep inflammation in check. So
Right.
they're great to incorporate. And then the second thing I would say is when you're thinking about immune health and you're thinking about your immune system,
Right.
you have to think about how intricately tied that is to your gut health, to digestion. You
Hmm.
know, in ancient Ayurveda, it was believed that all diseases begin in the gut. And now we are realizing modern science is showing that the integrity of your gut microbiome, how healthy your digestion is so intertwined with your immune system. 70% of your immune system resides in your gut. So spices that help your gut, your digestion. People know fennel seeds, cumin, coriander. These are amazing for gut health. Cardamom is a beautiful one, you know. So thinking about ways in which to add these on a regular basis. Sometimes it's worth incorporating them into a concentrated tea, like a very ancient Ayurvedic tea is called CCF or
Right.
cumin, coriander, fennel tea. Very, very good for gut health. So really thinking about your body as this entire kind of system that needs support, whether it's inflammation, gut health, and then of course we can talk about spices for cancer and spices that help mood and spices that prevent, you know, oxidative damage. But that's the way I like to think of spices in the context of the current kind of health crisis.
What are some of the easiest spices to sort of introduce into our lives right now? Or what are some of the immunity boosting spices that you would recommend that perhaps our viewers try?
Yeah, so the ones that I've mentioned, I would just reiterate. Turmeric, I think, is just wonderful to cook with as often as possible. It's a very mildly flavored spice. It has bitter notes, but those notes mellow out when you put the turmeric in a fat source like ghee or oil. So
Mhm.
don't just think of turmeric as like, oh, I'm making an Indian dish. Like try to use it, you know, in scrambled eggs or in your smoothies, lots of different ways, right?
Right.
That's a really important one and really powerful. I would say the other one, cumin, which is
Yeah.
not as well thought of, is actually powerful at boosting the immune system as well. So I like sprinkling it on salads. I like, of course, using it as the base of a lot of Indian vegetarian dishes or whatnot. But putting it in your hummus again is great. Sumac, which I mentioned, not as familiar to the Indian kitchen. Really, really lovely every time you want to add any kind of lemon notes
Right.
or limey notes. So that's a really beautiful one. Anything in the paprika, kind of smoked paprika, sweet paprika, spicy cayenne family is going to help with immunity, inflammation. And then maybe one more that I think people don't use as often, I would say, is cinnamon. So people think of cinnamon as like a dessert spice,
Right.
but it's really wonderful in savory dishes. It's part of Indian garam masala, which is a savory spice. I always say if you're going to use cinnamon often, try to find what's called true or Ceylon or Sri Lankan cinnamon, because the regular cinnamon has high amounts or has measurable amounts of a liver toxin. So if you're using cinnamon on a regular basis, try to find the true cinnamon, which has no or very little coumarin, which is the liver toxin.
Wow, these are some very key tips from you, and thank you again for sharing those. You know, while I'm discussing with you all of the content of the book and certain ideas and tips, it makes me wonder what was the process of writing this book, and what sort of put together the effort to publish it. I know you have a very interesting story about it, so I'd love for our viewers to actually, you know, learn about that too.
Yeah, so I self-published the cookbook, which really happened because I had the blog and I had a lot of interest, and I was living in Hong Kong at the time. And I didn't explore the traditional publishing route. I just thought, you know what, I'm going to crowdfund the book. I'm going to go to my blog audience and I'm going to ask them if they want the book. If they want the book, I'm going to ask them to pre-order it, and I'm going to use the funds to publish the book. And that's what I did. And it ended up being a very successful crowdfunding campaign. It was also the first self-published cookbook, I believe, to ever be featured on the Today Show on NBC, which was like a huge honor. So yeah, it just, you know, in hindsight, I'm just so grateful it all worked out. At the time, I was kind of like, let's just jump and hope the net appears. And, you know, it kind of did. So
You know, you're a mom, you're an entrepreneur, you're a cookbook author, you're also doing a wide range of works. My question to you, would that be, when you have so much going on, what are some of the greatest struggles that you've had to combat to find success in these? And, what are some of the struggles that you deal with on a daily basis to make sure the content is fresh, is something that people are learning from, and that you're also giving out information that helps others?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for asking it, because I think sometimes, for us influencers,
Yeah.
it seems like everything is so easy, effortless, and like there's never a bad day. So I'm like wired like every other human being. I have a lot of insecurities. I have imposter syndrome. Like I'm a PhD. Like, what do I know about cooking? Like, I'm not a chef. I'm a self-trained chef. Like, who's gonna want to cook my recipes? All that inner dialogue I have to deal with.
Right.
I think whenever I face those inner demons, I just try to bring myself back to my why. So I have worked quite hard to articulate my why. Like, why am I doing this? Why did I write a book? Why do I have a blog? Why do I have an Instagram presence? Like, what's my content about? Why? You
Right.
know? And it really is like, sounds kind of maybe like, I don't know, idealistic or unrealistic or cheesy, but my why is really that I really do believe that it is possible for us to live in a world where humanity is disease free. So I like to imagine a disease free world through food and lifestyle as medicine, whether it's preventative medicine or therapeutic medicine. And so when I think about that, I just think about, oh, what can I create that's going to help people get out of that state of dis-ease? And disease doesn't have to be an overt medical condition, right? It can be, like, it can be a diabetes diagnosis or cancer diagnosis. And I'm really passionate about creating recipes or educating people about how to leverage the power of food, spices, lifestyle as medicine in those contexts. But you can feel dis-ease without having a disease, if you know what I mean. Like, you can feel like your vitality is missing. You can feel chronically tired. You can feel stressed. You can feel anxious, all of which we're all feeling right now. And all of which I feel, very often. I'm a mom, like you said, I'm overextended. I'm an entrepreneur. I try to do too many things at once, and I feel all those things. So all the practices that I deploy for my own sanity and my own well-being are practices I share in my content. So that's really where the content comes from. And just going back to my why and realizing that social media is a highlight reel, and you can't, like, spending too much time on social media, I genuinely believe is bad for our mental well-being. So I like to use it as the powerful tool that it is,
Mm.
but also allow myself space away from it where I think like true creativity can blossom.
What connects with your readers the most, or some of your supporters and followers on these social media platforms? What kind of content like really drives a lot of attention to it, and that you think is actually working?
Yeah, so I think when people think healthy, when they hear me say, oh, disease-free world, like, it sounds scary, dry, very clinical and boring. Like, oh, there's no fun in that. I think what resonates the most with my content is that I really think I have found a way to make truly healthy living like fun and delicious. So the recipes that really resonate are the ones that make people want to make them. They look mouth-wateringly delicious. Like, I'm not trying to make you eat boring food, and I'm not trying to make you live a boring life. I really think there is room for everything. So whenever there is, I think the content that resonates the most is basically a recipe that makes people salivate on Instagram, but it happens to be like incredibly good for you.
Yeah. And I think it's so important, especially, looking back at our viewers, the South Asian American community, to have food that's healthy and that's, better for them, because we run a risk of many diseases as well in our community. And I think that, I'm sure you'll agree with that. It's beneficial if you are working on a diet that's good for you.
Yeah, and it's not rocket science, and it doesn't have to be about deprivation. That's what I try to educate my viewers on. Like, it's simple, it's delicious,
Right.
and it can literally change your life.
Definitely. Let's talk about BuzzFeed real quick here and your collaboration with Tasty. You're one
Yeah.
of the only Indian American chefs there that is bringing a lot of recipes. And again, it's very your style. It's not just Indian. It's a mix of all of the spices and blending a lot of flavor and culture. Talk to me about that relation you have with them, and what does that mean for you to have a presence of an Indian American in a platform like that?
Oh, yeah, it's one of the biggest blessings, one of the biggest door openers that kind of happened for me. So it was about 2 years ago, crazy that it's been 2 years, but about 2 years ago, I got an email from a casting scout at BuzzFeed, and I literally thought it was spam. And at that point, I had just published Spice Spice Baby. I hadn't even been on the Today Show yet. I had just self published it. I was on Instagram stories, like just kind of talking about my mission, my passion, sharing recipes. And I got this email, which I thought was spam. I was like, what? That's so like out there. But I responded, and it ended up being a scouting, one of their scouters who was like, oh, we're building a talent bench of external talent, and we'd like to interview you and audition you to be part of our talent bench, kind of creating content for Tasty, bringing your content to Tasty. And if people don't know, listening, Tasty is the largest food network online. It's, I think, currently has like 37 million Instagram followers, 10 million YouTube subscribers, 100 million Facebook followers, like just crazy numbers. So they have managed to really create this like insane digital presence. And so to be auditioned to be a part of that was like, oh my gosh. So I went through the steps, I went through the audition, I had to cook. I had to do like a Food Network style, like walk in, see some ingredients, make a dish on camera, and kind of interview and answer questions about my life while I did it. So that was really fun. And yeah, I guess I got the job, whatever that means, So that partnership now is coming up on 2 years, and it's just been amazing, as you can imagine. I mean, they have been incredibly supportive. Their audience is huge. It's a big challenge for me to bring the healthy food message to an audience that is all about like decadent, hedonistic, delicious, like triple fried food, But the audience is also huge. So there are people who are health conscious and want to make healthier food delicious. So it's been really fun to take my message and kind of bring it to such a big audience. And I can only say just like how blessed I am and how many doors have opened since that collaboration. They've helped grow my social following from like 6,000 to 117,000.
Wow.
So it's just really been one after another, like doors opening for me, and I'm just so grateful.
What's your future vision for something like that collaboration or your book? Where do you see yourself head towards in the near future in terms of the content you're creating, in terms of food, in terms of education about that?
Yeah, so I'm working very early stage on another book.
Oh, wow.
It's going to be like the next Spice Spice Baby book, really focused on eating to beat disease. So it will be more sciencey and more focused on really helping people. Haven't quite decided the focus yet, like whether it's just going to be cancer, which was the focus of my PhD research, or whether it's going to be like, here's a way you can eat to combat the 5 major diseases that plague us, diabetes, cancer, and neurodegeneration, whatever. So really like a food as medicine cookbook, but super delicious, super exciting and elevated, and not clinical or dry at all. So that's a challenge, but I'm up for it. And then, I'm just going to continue to create digital content, whether it's free content or whether it's digital programs. So I run a health coaching boot camp that is meant to help women overhaul their health in kind of 6 weeks using food and lifestyle as medicine.
Wow.
I also have, other like I have a monthly membership, which is people subscribe and they get access to a monthly online cooking class that I host for a different health area every month. I do a webinar. So it's all around. I want to just keep educating and creating content while I create a business around food and lifestyle as medicine, and always keep it delicious and exciting.
What's your 10-year plan? Because I feel like you must have one.
10-year plan is just a platform that is just really, really helping move this needle away from disease towards more vitality.
Right.
Whether it's through books, other digital content, partnerships, collaborations, a presence on TV, I'm not sure, but really just continuing educating and helping people find their inner vitality, which is really our birthright. It shouldn't be that hard. It isn't that hard. So if I can just help move that needle, I'll be kind of on track.
Dr. Kanchan Koya, we are coming towards the close of this interview, but I have a few questions left here. Number one would be the culture tree. It's a great partner of ITV Gold, but you have also worked with them on a food literacy program, and there are a couple of other projects that you're also working with them. I'd love to sort of share, your opinions on the culture tree and the kind of work you're doing with them, and why you think it's so important for us to introduce that kind of literacy program to, the youngest generation.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I think food is so much more than health, right? Like, I'm very passionate about food and health, but food is culture. Food is a connection to our ancestors, to our roots, and especially for the South Asian community in the US, it's just such an integral part of our relationship with our homeland, our families, and just such a great kind of offering to the world. I really think Indian food is just so beautiful. So I think teaching our kids about their roots through food, with my partnership with the Culture Tree, doing like spice workshops, helping children understand. I mean, the Indian spice box is such a beautiful offering to the world. It's like we take it for granted as Indians and we almost downplay it, but it's like it's packed with nature's goodness. It's so rich in terms of history, geography. I mean, wars were fought around the conquest of spices. So there's so much to educate kids about history, their roots, their culture, and health when we talk about the Indian spice box and Indian food. So if I can, do that, and really it is about educating the next generation, right? I mean, we know what to do. We can take care of ourselves, but if we want to leave a better world, like, we have to empower them. And so the Culture Tree, I think, my son takes their Hindi classes and he's so excited about it every week. And then the programs that they do around all the festivals, I mean, it's much needed. And I think just such an important contribution to keeping us connected to our roots and celebrating our roots in the context of diverse America, and like enriching other communities' lives through our stories.
If you had any advice for South Asian American parents, especially in terms of building nutrition and immunity for their children, what would you tell them?
I would say if we go back to our Indian food basics,
Right.
so our traditional Indian diet is actually one of the healthiest in the world, right? It's packed with plant-based foods, which the research tells us over and over again. Whether you look at cultures that enjoy exceptional longevity around the world, that are disease-free, plant-based foods are the dominant food on the plate. And the traditional Indian diet is predominantly plant-based. Even if you occasionally enjoy your meat curry or whatever, every Indian knows the traditional Indian plate is very, very heavy on plants, whether it's the dal and the lentils, the beans, the vegetables, usually multiple kinds, the whole grain, homemade, handmade rotis. So I always say, go back to the basics, go back to the simple peasant foods. That's where the healing lies. What gets us into trouble is the processed foods that have become associated with modernization, coolness. There's room for that. Like, you can eat 20% of your diet can be that.
Yeah.
If 80% of your diet is real, whole, unadulterated, simple, ancestral peasant food, you're going to win.
For sure. I also would like to reflect upon this NGO that you're working with, who is also benefiting a lot of underserved communities in India. I think that's such a wonderful thing to do, to attach yourself with a nonprofit association as well. I'd love for you to reflect on that, because I know a certain percentage goes to that.
Yes, so we donate a percentage of book sales to Sneha, which is the NGO that we partnered with in India. They're doing important work around malnutrition in urban slums. And, I grew up in India. I live here now, and I'm very fortunate. But I'm also very sensitive to the fact that while we here in the West talk about chronic diseases like diabetes and inflammation and heart disease, which are really diseases of too much food and too much of the wrong types of food.
Yeah.
There is a big portion of the population in the world, and particularly in India, that suffers from the opposite problem, right? Of malnourishment, especially children. So that irony isn't lost on me, and I wanted to just do my part in a small way. Sneha is amazing. They have partnered with the Gates Foundation. They're very, very, they're very efficiently run. impactful organizations. So it was an honor to partner with them. And I will say that something that I did last year when I went to India, and it's work I'm hoping to continue to do, is more work in urban slums. So in Pune, where I'm from, we actually launched a health and wellness program for mothers and kids, Spice Spice Baby, in collaboration with a local NGO called the Gyan Prakash Foundation.
Hmm.
And we're teaching mothers in the slums about the power of their spice box,
Wow.
about the power of the traditional Indian diet when executed properly with a wide variety of different vegetables and lentils and all the spices to really, really raise a healthier generation. So that's been really, really powerful as well. I'm always looking for ways in which I can do more in that regard, back
So
home.
important to do that. It's so important to give back. And I think our community is, especially here based in the US, is doing a lot of work in that sense. And I'm glad that you're also contributing. Dr. Koya, this was so great having you on ITV Gold. I'd love for you to give one last message to our audience. We're dealing with a lot right now, and I think it's so important to remain a little positive, to look at the brighter side of life and maybe add some spice into your life. So I would love for you to, just give us the closing remarks.
Yeah, closing remarks are, sometimes we make feeling healthy and being healthy far too complicated. But the reality is, our ancestors were really wise. And in all the noise and excitement and confusion of modern life, we've kind of lost touch with that ancestral wisdom. And so, Spice Spice Baby, the book, the platform, is about taking so much of that ancestral wisdom, showing its validation from a modern scientific perspective, but really going back to the basics. So, are you sleeping well? Are you taking time to spend some time in nature? Are you taking some really deep breaths? Are you connecting with loved ones? Are you moving your body, whether it's a walk, like going back to the basics?